Church here, and welcome to the Game Grinder, and today we're doing a bonus pickup video. So a little backstory here is Jason of Corpse Flood Gaming. Hopefully many of you know him, if not everybody. He was the previous co-host of the Game Tennis podcast, good friend of mine, awesome guy. But as it goes, he tends to pick up game lots and sends me pictures and asks me if I'm interested in things. Of course, earlier this year, right before MGC, he actually brought me a surprise box of games, including a Wii U and things like that, which was absolutely awesome. And he has pretty much done it again. I had a few things to trade, but this was definitely a completely one-sided deal. I knew a lot of these games, but I kind of forgot games that I'd mentioned that I was interested in when he sent me pictures of some of the doubles that he received. But he just recently came down to visit for the weekend. We were going to hit up a metal show, hit up a local arcade, but of course there was video games to be had. So we're going to run through this. There is a lot of games here, but I am excited to show what I got. First thing here, Back in the Day Gamer is going to be pretty stoked about. He always asks, where's the NES? And we got some NES stuff this time, which has actually been a while. So this is pretty cool. Some stuff I've been looking for quite a while. First game here is one that I had as a kid. I absolutely loved this game. When Jason was down, I actually pulled out this old folder of Mega Man artwork I used to do back when I was in elementary school in the early 90s. And I had plenty of artwork from this game because I loved some of the Robot Masters. We have Mega Man 4, another awesome entry to the series. It's been a while since I played it, but happy to have this back in the collection. The next game here is a Capcom classic, Disney's Darkwing Duck. Pretty much hard to go wrong with Capcom on the NES. So pretty neat to get that. Then we got a couple classic puzzle games for the NES here. First one being Yoshi's Cookie. And then we also got Yoshi. Then finally getting the sequel to another game series that I have the first entry to, and that is Gauntlet 2. I have the Tengen version of the first Gauntlet, and for this pickup video, this will not be the last time we hear about some Gauntlet. Then I'm sure most of you already kind of know the deal about this, but we have another Capcom game, this time Disney's The Little Mermaid. And I remember particularly back in the day when I was a kid that I had some friends that would scoff about this game. A friend of mine actually had this, said, hey, this is actually a really cool game, come over and check it out. And sure enough I did, and it's actually a pretty cool game. Albeit extremely easy, but not every game for the NES needs to be super challenging. And again, like I said, hard to go wrong with Capcom on the NES. Then the last NES game here is actually one that I've wanted since I was a kid, and that is A Boy and His Blob. Now last year I actually picked up the Wii remake of this, which happens to be a Way Forward remake. And kind of the deal with this game is when I was younger, I didn't get a lot of games. I didn't get a lot of game magazines or anything like that. So once in a while when I did get game magazines, I kind of like reveled in them, you know, read them front to back, and I happened to get one of those kind of like tips and tricks guidebook kind of deals, which was actually, I believe it was offered through Scholastic, which is kind of like a elementary school book program where, you know, they'll have like book fairs and you can buy stuff, and I picked up one of those, and one of the games in that little magazine or book was some information about A Boy and His Blob. I thought it looked cool then, still think it looks cool now, still haven't played it, so now I finally get that opportunity. I have heard that this isn't the best game in the world, but it will definitely be fun, kind of finally achieving that childhood dream of playing A Boy and His Blob. So next stack here is for the Super Nintendo, so let's jump right into it. So first game here is Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. Another classic Mario game. This one I never owned, but I rented it many times back in the day, and happy to add this one to the collection. Next one here is one that I've actually never played, but I hear it's pretty decent, and that is Saturday Night Slam Masters. This is a wrestling game, a little bit more concept, you know, not WWF characters, but it's one I've heard things about, so I was like, hey, I'll get that one too. The next game here has a chewed up label, but this is The Incredible Hulk for the Super Nintendo. Don't really know a whole lot about this game. Beat 'em up, and even some of the worst beat 'em ups on the Super Nintendo are still enjoyable to some extent, I think. Next game here I was super stoked to get, and that is Contra 3, The Alien Wars. Can never go wrong with Contra, and I always thought this one was really cool. Then the next game here is Final Fight. Surprisingly enough, I have not had this in my collection. Pretty common game, a definite classic, but for some reason or another, never had it. Stoked to finally have it. Then the last Super Nintendo game here is Super Star Wars Return of the Jedi. Repeated rentals for me back in the day. Then sticking with the theme of Nintendo, we have some Nintendo 64 games. First one here is Mario Golf. I've never actually played this one, but I've heard it's a pretty good golf game. Some people kind of scoff at the golf games, but especially with the Nintendo and Super Nintendo, they were always games that I always enjoyed playing with friends. So it'll be interesting to see how that transitioned to the Nintendo 64, because I've never played any golf games on the 64. The next game here is 1080 Degrees Snowboarding, kind of getting into that extreme sports craze of the mid-90s. I always heard this one is pretty decent, never actually played it, at least I don't believe so. Then we got another kind of chewed up label here, and that is Quest 64, one of the few RPG offerings for the 64. Not a well-regarded game, but a classic as far as I'm concerned. Then the last game here is a pretty cool trilogy, that being the Mortal Kombat trilogy. Can't go wrong with classic Mortal Kombat. Here I have a Game Boy Advanced box and manual for a game that I had loose, that I totally forgot that I had loose. Somehow Jason remembered that I had this game loose and happened to come across a box and manual for the game, and that is Fire Emblem: The Sacred Stones. So I now have this game complete. My second complete GBA game. So then finally moving away from Nintendo onto some Sega Genesis, we got a couple loose games here. Actually, I have this game on the Super Nintendo, but this is considered to be the superior version, and that is Disney's Aladdin. Now I know most of you know this, and I've already kind of mentioned it, but surprisingly enough, for the Nintendo, Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, a lot of the Disney games were actually really solid games. And then we also have the Sega Genesis 6-pack, which includes Sonic the Hedgehog, Golden Axe, Streets of Rage, Revenge of Shinobi, Columns, and Super Hang-On. For some reason, I've never picked up this cartridge. It's definitely a little collection worth having, so I am glad to finally have that. So jumping up a couple generations to some more modern games, as it were, kind of going back to Nintendo. First one being Tales of Symphonia for the GameCube, which ticks off another one of the Tales of games. I have the Tales of Symphonia Chronicles, but this is one more entry closer to a complete Tales of series. Then, of course, with that, I need to make the time to play all of the Tales of games, as is. I've only played 2 of them, Tales of Destiny and most recently Tales of Berseria. So there's a pretty big gap between those, which hopefully someday I can catch up. And then for the Wii, an entry of a series that I really enjoy, and that is Mario Party 8. I've never actually played Mario Party 8, so I'm looking forward to this. Pretty easy games to bust out when I have friends over, usually a lot of fun. So then with my recent trend of inheriting lots and lots of Xbox games, we have some Xbox games, but this is not the bulk of the modern stuff here, just a few Xbox games. So first one here is Shenmue 2. I have Shenmue 1. I unfortunately have never played the series. I was thinking about getting the HD collection, but if I don't, I have the first 2 entries. I have Shenmue 1 for the Dreamcast and now Shenmue 2. And the next game here is an entry in a series that I haven't played since the NES. I've heard pretty good things about them. I think this is kind of like a spin-off one, but Yaiba Ninja Gaiden Z. Don't really know much. I know like Ninja Gaiden Black was like the remake of the Ninja Gaiden reboot, but ninjas are badass, and I love a good challenge, so here's hoping. And then with this one, I think I pretty much might have all Halo games for the Xbox and the Xbox 360. This is Halo 3 ODST. Another series I haven't really played much of, but I would like to play at some point, and now I can kind of pretty much run through the whole series if I want. And then rounding out another series here for the Xbox 360, we have Fable 2, as well as Fable 3, an RPG series that I've heard great things. I think the first the one that's considered the best. I think things kind of tapered off towards the end, but still pretty stoked to have that series. And then another entry to one of my kind of game shrines that I have in my collection, a game that I had day one. I actually put 60 hours into the demo before the game was even released, but great to have the physical representation on my shelf. Happens to be one of my favorite games of all time, and that is Left 4 Dead. And I am more than happy to grow that Valve collection I have. But like I said, I have it digitally, hundreds of hours into this game. I'm no stranger to my praise and love of this series. If you haven't played them, really should. And I know for certain, at least the PC community is still going pretty strong. Okay, so we're into the final stretch of games here, and we got some stuff for the PlayStation 2. My PlayStation 2 collection is pretty beastly, and this is a beastly haul, so let's just get to it. So there's not a great organization to this, so I'm just going to try to keep them kind of organized as I go, to keep a couple series together, but let's just get to it. And as I mentioned, there would be more Gauntlet, and we have some more Gauntlet, and that is Gauntlet 7 Sorrows for the PlayStation 2. I don't really know much about this one, but it looks pretty neat. Then kind of sticking with the isometric RPG kind of games, expanding with the console series of this, of course there's the PC classics of Baldur's Gate, and now I have Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance and Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance 2, which for some reason I really missed out on a lot of these just really solid RPGs for the PlayStation 2. Talked about it before, PlayStation 2 is kind of when I really started getting really heavy into PC gaming. I really missed out on a lot of stuff, and I have a ton to catch up on. It's ridiculous. But then sticking with the isometric RPGs, we have a sequel to a game that Jason had previously hooked me up with, a game series I didn't really know nothing about. He said, hey, this game's awesome, hooked me up with the original. Sure enough, it's awesome. I still haven't beaten it yet, but I've played through quite a bit. But we got Champions of Norath, Return to Arms. Surprisingly solid games, and they look fantastic. Like when I started playing Champions of Norath, like seriously shocked, like one of the best looking games I played on the PlayStation 2. So I need to finish that up, and then I can jump on to the sequel. Then a couple entries in a series that I played, but I never like played seriously, just kind of one of those games that friends would have, and I would just kind of mess around with. My brother was particularly big into these games. Of course, I really enjoyed the original entries, 1 and 2, and then, of course, most recently, the 5th entry, but we got Grand Theft Auto Vice City and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas for the PlayStation 2. And sticking with the theme of Rockstar games, previously I'd gotten a loose copy of Bully from Jason, but now I have a complete copy of Bully. And another Rockstar entry here is Manhunt. I never played the first one. I have the second one, never finished it. I got it more because of the controversy about it. Potentially it was going to get an AO rating, and then they had to do some censorship because you go around like killing people in very like gruesome ways. And I believe it's either the action replay or the Game Shark. If you use one of those, you can actually remove the filter. It kind of does this like screen tearing blurry effect when you kill people to like reduce the shock of it or something, I guess. That's how they got around the censors. So here's hoping the first one is, right up that alley as well. Then the next game here is a series that I've only played a little bit of. I've played the first game quite a bit, but nothing since then, and that is We Love Katamari. These are pretty fun, I'm not sure what you'd call them, puzzle games, not really puzzle games, puzzle adventure games, I'm not sure. They're a lot of fun, they're really silly, and I'm happy to finally have at least one of the games in my collection. Then we have another series that I have yet to play. I've always heard great things, always wanted to. Originally this started out as kind of like a Resident Evil spin-off series, but we have Onimusha 2, Samurai's Destiny, and Onimusha 3, Demon Siege. I believe there is a 4th Onimusha game, and of course I'm sure a lot of you have heard that there is going to be an Onimusha HD remaster, so that is pretty neat. Alright, then you might not believe it, but there are more PlayStation 2 games to cover here. So we'll keep going here. We got the Sega Genesis Collection. This is a pretty neat package. Comes with stuff like Alex the Kid, Bonanza Brothers, Kid Chameleon, Flicky, Gain Ground, Phantasy Star 2, 3, and 4, Super Thunderblade, Sword of Vermilion, Vector Man 1 and 2, many more. So these sorts of compilations are always awesome to have because you get so many games, and the Genesis compilations I thought were always really great. Then a game I always kind of heard like mixed things about, but kind of like one of those hidden kind of like horror gems, and that is Cold Fear. Another sort of like survival horror game. Like I said, I don't really know a whole lot about it, but it does get mentioned here and there. Then another collection-based release here is the Capcom Classics Collection Volume 2. I'm not exactly sure what games are included on here, but I know there's going to be some Street Fighter, looks like some Captain Commando, and a bunch of other stuff. So that is cool. I'll have to dive into that and see what I get. Then this is a game that I actually used to have. I'd originally gotten my PlayStation 2 from a friend like a year or so after it was released, and I got this game and one other game. This being Ico, which of course is a Team Ico release. The guys who also brought us Shadow of the Colossus and The Last Guardian. I do have the PlayStation 3 HD remaster of Ico and Shadow of the Colossus. And then of course earlier this year we had the remake of Shadow of the Colossus, which was awesome, which is actually a prequel to Ico. But glad to have a complete Team Ico collection. And then we got some entries to a series that I've never played. I've watched some people play these games quite a bit. Again, another kind of Resident Evil spin-off series, and that is Devil May Cry. And we got Devil May Cry 1, Devil May Cry 2, and Devil May Cry 3. I know there's a few other Devil May Cry games, so the Devil May Cry collection is far from complete, but this is a pretty awesome start to that. And then we got the third entry to the Grandia series, another series that I really need to play. Justin, or Cardboard Zero, the current co-host of the Game Tennis podcast, highly recommended the original Grandia. I actually picked it up from him, and he said nothing but amazing things about it, and I really need to get to that series. But happy to have the third entry. And then a game I don't really know much about, but I was like, hey, ninjas, samurais, could be pretty cool. Kind of looks like Onimusha, and that is Genji, Dawn of the Samurai. Then a sequel I've always been super interested in. Haven't heard great things about it. I loved the original release of this, but this is the sequel, Samurai Legend Musashi, the follow-up to Brave Fencer Musashi. A underrated hidden gem, at least the original game, so pretty neat to get the sequel. And then lastly, for games, the last game here is Radiata Stories, an RPG from Square Enix. Then this next item here was a trade, but an incredibly one-sided trade that I just really makes me appreciate the friends that I have, especially Jason. He's hooked me up so much with games. It's incredible. I wish I could equally repay the favor. I know ultimately it's about the love of video games. We're both collectors. We both help each other out when we can. This was a bit much, but saying I'm stoked to have this is a severe understatement, but opens up a whole nother collection opportunity for me. But with that said, I now have a PlayStation VR. Pretty much complete here. Of course, has all the stuff involved, manuals and the unit and the headset, and I don't believe it comes with the Move controllers, but I already have a couple of Move controllers, which kind of makes a lot of sense now because he was kind of asking me about PlayStation Move controllers. Ah, man. Seriously, I don't deserve the hookups, but, words escape me to express my appreciation. I already told them in person how much I greatly appreciated this stuff, but this is so freaking awesome again, so I am definitely stoked to have that. But with that, I haven't been paying a whole lot of attention to VR games. I know there are some definitely notable games, stuff like Rush of Blood, Job Simulator, like Rick and Morty's Virtual Reality, Resident Evil 7, but I would love to hear some other great VR recommendations for games I should really look out for. So that is another Corpse Flood's Game Flood, because when he hooks me up, he hooks me up. And again, man, thank you very much. I know we hook each other up, but you always go above and beyond, and even saying above and beyond is an understatement. And then for everybody watching, of course, I would love to hear your thoughts on some of these games, especially some of these modern games were ones that I didn't really know a whole lot about. You just kind of showed me some pictures and, hey, are you interested in any of these games? And I was like, yeah, I don't have that and I don't have that. And so, you don't really have any knowledge to back them all up, so would love to know in particular which ones are ones I should try to get to first. So yeah, I really don't know much else to say here. Jason's not really doing videos these days, but I still would say stop by his channel. Check it out. He's an awesome guy. He's still around. He's just not doing new videos. He's a great friend to have. I know some of you other people watching can definitely vouch for that. So I guess I'm not going to ramble anymore. I'm going to wrap this up here. So thank you very much for watching, and I will talk to you next time on the Game Grinder.